Hello everyone, Grimm here, and welcome to today's video. Please remember to like and subscribe. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I nearly got trafficked. So, some backstory to this. I, 18 female, live in Sydney, Australia, and I was 15 at the time. I went to a local beach by myself and was just sitting in the sand tanning. I had a podcast going, ironically, about murder cases, and had sunnies on. The beach is probably a kilometre long, and I was in quite a quiet part. There was a group of two boys about 50 metres away from me, but that was about it. So I'm laying there as this man walks over. He seems about 30 years old. He starts talking about how I look beautiful in my red bikini. He had a very thick accent, and I said, "Oh, thanks," and he sat down next to me. I had an instant feeling that something was wrong. He started talking about how he's a tourist and kept on trying to know me. I gave him some advice on bars around, but he said, "How do you know? Aren't you still in high school?" So he obviously knew that I was young. Anyways, this went on for about 20 minutes and he started talking, practically begging for me to come over to his house for a few drinks. I kept saying no, and I was looking for a way out. This group of girls, around 20 years old, walk around near me, and I say to the man, "Oh, that's my cousin Lisa," and I immediately run up to them and said that I'm only 15 and I don't know this man. I said, "You're my cousin." Immediately they gave me hugs saying they haven't seen me in so long, etc. They say, "Come sit with us," and they grab my bag and towel. The man immediately walks off. Honestly, I'm so thankful for the girls who caught on. The man was just extremely creepy, constantly commenting about how I looked while knowing that I was so young. Let me tell you about the button man. My name is Ben, and I live in Australia. In the southeast of Australia lies the state of Victoria, and in that state lies the high country, an extremely vast and remote expanse of alpine mountains and valleys that largely only are accessible by four-wheel drives and can take days to get in and out of. The place is popular with four-wheelers, deer hunters, and hikers. We four-wheeled, and this was the destination chosen to go camping for a few days with my partner and I, sometime away from the world beyond the reach of mobile phones. The four-wheel drive was loaded up, list double-checked, vehicle maintenance done, fuel loaded onto the roof racks, and the police station closest to our destination notified of our trip. It is common for people to notify them as a safety measure, especially when not traveling in a convoy. Again, very remote. And off we went. We were heading to a valley. A remote valley deep in the high country. A huge atmosphere-type valley with alpine mountains rising high enough in every direction, and a river running along the valley floor. Towards the end of the first full day of driving, we finally made our way down the last track for the day, skirting the ridge and arriving at the valley floor as the sun dipped below the mountains. We found a secluded spot to pitch our tent, nestled in amongst the eucalyptic trees by a riverbank. It was midweek and off-season, so we were the only ones in the valley that we knew of. After setting up camp and having a meal by the fire, as the sun set down, we snuggled together in our sleeping bags and, in a short order, we decided to hit the hay. At some point in the night, I woke up to a loud noise. I wasn't quite sure what I heard from inside the tent. I listened. Nothing. I thought to myself that we must be going mad. No sooner had I thought it, I heard another noise. It sounded like something falling off our camp table and hitting the ground. I put it down to possums or wombats fossicking about. Common in the area and nothing to worry about. Should have packed up after dinner, I thought, and went back to sleep. Sunrise came and we slowly woke up. Needing to pee, I opened the tent and jumped out, looking around. Something just came over me, a chill. It wasn't the way we left it. Instead of seeing two chairs together by the fire where we were sitting, one of them was by the table, and on the table was a loaf of bread that I swear I packed away again the night before. I walked over to the table to inspect it. A half-eaten piece of bread was sitting there with very obvious chomp marks taken out of it. I flung the temp open and asked, "Were you up before me? Did you have some bread?" "No," was the answer. Jess got up, and together we went through all of our stuff. Nothing was missing. As we went to check the four-wheel drive, I noticed footprints. There was a bunch of them around the front of the car, where the hood was. Most of the camp was covered in grass. This was one of the only few spots that was just dirt. Had someone tried to open it? Very distinct footprints, not mine or my partner's. Perhaps they had already been there. These camping grounds are used intermittently, and obviously we weren't looking at the ground when we arrived the night before, with the sun setting and all. I don't think either of us wanted to actually admit that we were both thinking that someone had been creeping about our campsite that night, far from civilization. We discussed if a possum could have made the bite marks, argued about if one of us had eaten the bread or left it out, and eventually discussed moving on and camping somewhere else. After much deliberation, we decided to stay. I had the rifle in the four-wheel drive, which I guess gave me an overinflated sense of security, which in hindsight was a very poor choice. As the day rolled on, the sun shining and nothing eventful happening, I decided to walk across the valley floor, an open field subalpine grassland, about 800 meters to an old ruin of an isolated homestead built by the settlers who ran cattle in the valley some 100 years ago. It is steeped in mystery. There was an unsolved multiple murder from the 1970s that always captivated people. I read the plaque, took some photos, and started wandering back to the camp. As I neared the halfway mark back to camp, I noticed Jess walking across the field towards me. Must have gotten bored, I thought. As she approached, it was clear that she was in a panic. Immediately, she started to tell me how she went down to the riverbank to wash the pots and pans, and as she looked up, she saw someone over her shoulder on the other side of the river, watching her from deep in the bush. I had no reason whatsoever not to believe her. I asked her what they looked like and got told that it was an old man in their 70s or thereabout, scraggly looking and in tattered old clothes. Apparently, the second she looked up, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the unimpenetrable bush. I couldn't comprehend it. How was someone out here without a four-wheel drive or dirt bike? And how would anyone get to that side of the bank without first crossing over from our side? There's days' worth of damn near impossible to walk through bush on the other side just to get to where my partner saw him. I decided to jump in the four-wheel drive along the length of the valley, checking the dozen or so riverside camping spots as we went. I wanted to spot a camp, have my partner ID the guy, and make sure he wasn't creeping, with our theory being that he may have been a hunter, off in the bush after a deer. After making our way up and down the valley and not seeing anyone, we drove back to the camp at a loss to explain anything. As the sun started to set, and with my partner and I quite shaken, I grabbed the rifle and sat it next to us as we cooked dinner and chatted, having a few drinks to settle the nerves. Had we been spooked? Was it just that there are a lot of mysteries surrounding the valley and that homestead murders? These are the questions we had, the things we talked about as we settled in for a good foot warming by the fire. At some point, Jess needed to go to the toilet, and I was asked to come with her to a spot behind a tree where we placed the portable toilet, about 50 meters from the camp. Considering everything that had gone on, it was a no-brainer. Jess did her business, and we turned around and came to the other side of the tree, and that's when we saw him, standing at our camp about a meter from the rifle that I had sitting against the table, was a man. I started rattling off a list. Old, check. Scraggly looking, check. Tattered clothes, check. Jess squeezed my arm so hard I thought it was going to come off. Everything about her body language screamed that this was the same man. As we got closer, I could make out more odd things about him. He had part of a deer antler in his hand, and it looked like he'd been whittling away at it, and what looked like antler pieces carved into plugged large holes in his ears, like stretchers made of bone. Same goes for the bone-looking buttons in his ratty old coat that he wore, old leather shoes that looked homemade. "G'day, mate," he said. "Fuck me, mate." "You gave us a heart attack," I said, officially shitting bricks. "Where have you come from, mate? Everything all right?" "Just over yonder." "You lot aren't hunting around here, are you?" Looking directly at the rifle. "We might, yeah. Why?" "There's no hunting around here. Not enough deer as it is." "Well, we hadn't decided on it. Probably packing up anyway," I said as I edged my way towards the rifle. "I should put this away. I didn't mean to spook you, mate," I said, looking for an excuse to get the rifle in my hands. "It's all good. Guns don't spook me," he said. I didn't imagine they would. I picked the rifle up by the barrel and held it like a walking stick in an attempt to be non-confrontational, breathing a sigh of relief. "No offense, but you caught us a bit by surprise. You gotta be the only one we've seen since we got here." "Yeah, I saw you coming last night." "Fucking bet you did." "I've been coming up here for 40 years. Beautiful spot, isn't it? Takes a bit to get down to the valley, hey?" "Yeah, mate. Look, no offense, but we're gonna hit the sack soon. Do you need a lift back to your camp?" "Nah, all good. Just out for a wander before I tuck in for the night. Saw the fire, thought I'd say g'day anyway. I'd better be on my way." And with that he turned and walked off, parallel to the river, into the dark, no torch. That was officially enough to spook us beyond any ability to calm down, and we decided to pack up in the dark and head out. Even if driving in the dark was momentarily stupid an idea, in this part of high country, we got into the four-wheel drive and drove out, taking us along the valley floor. We didn't see a single fire, a camp, a vehicle, nothing. We kept on driving. Halfway home, Jess's bored from the drive, flipped on the camera. No memory card. What the hell? After getting home and telling a few people about what had happened, a friend's dad, who was an avid bushman himself, was the one who officially freaked the hell out of us. "Oh, you met the button man." "The what now?" I said. "The button man. He's an old bushman who goes out into the high country for months at a time, hunts with a spear, appears out of nowhere, scares people, has buttons made of bone. There's a heap of people going missing up that way. The cops keep looking but can't find a single trace. Campers, hikers. One camp was found burnt to the ground and a car left behind abandoned. They can't find any evidence at all." A quick Google confirmed it. The missing people, the button man, the lack of evidence. Police set out into the bush and found his camp, spoke with the man but have nothing else to go on. We don't camp in that valley anymore. Hell, we don't camp that side of the high country anymore. Anyway, that's our story of how we met the button man. So this happened a couple of hours ago. I, a 19-year-old female, was clubbing with my friends, and at around 1:40 a.m. I told them that I was going to head home. Not a long walk, maybe 5 minutes at the most. As I got to the corner of the block that my hostel is on, A man in the back seat of a white car tapped on the window. I turned around to look, and they were all saying things like, "Hey, come here." I turned back around and continued walking home, a little scared, of course. Then I heard a car door open, and I see a big old man, maybe in his 30s, get out and walk towards me, saying, "Oi," and "come back here," repeatedly. I turned back and tried to walk faster towards my hostel, which was another 200 meters from where I was. He kept walking towards me and got faster and faster, but never more than a brisk walk. At this point, I was shitting bricks, and the only thing that I could think of was how I'm going to be one of the topics on a crime podcast. I'm going to be one of those girls that gets kidnapped a mere minute from her home. He continued for another 10 seconds. Meanwhile, I was trying to think of something I could use as a weapon. I had nothing on me except for what was in my pockets, ID and money. I turned around and saw that he wasn't there anymore. Scared that he had gone back to the car to drive around and grab me, I ran to my hostel, right to my boyfriend. I can't stop thinking about what he had wanted from me. I'm sorry if this was too mild for this sub. I was kind of just wanting to see if anyone had any ideas what sort of things happen or what they could have wanted from me. Anyway, thank you for listening. Just a quick edit. Guys, I'm in Australia, where it is fine to go out clubbing. Hey, I live in Melbourne, Australia, western suburbs. It's the bad part of town. I don't have a car, so I rely on public transportation. I went to go see a friend who lives literally in the CBD, what Americans call downtown. I live 9 stations away from that. I got to my station at 11 p.m. I'm a male, I'm 28 years old. Usually I don't worry about walking at all alone at night. The walk home for me from the station is about 25 minutes. It's up a main road that I turn off onto my road and then walk a little bit further. As I was walking down the main road, I noticed someone who was walking behind, a little further away from me. I thought nothing of it. He was the only one around since it was late on the weekend. I kept track of him, and he bolted towards me, then stopped. Did some strange mannerisms, like with his hands, that I can't describe it, and then again he stopped, just standing there. So I was scared and started to walk faster, trying to get home. As I got to the point where I had to turn to walk into my street, I was thinking, for the love of Christ, please still don't be following me, but my heart sunk to the floor when I saw him turn the corner. I bolted as fast as I could, but he caught up with me. I was frozen in fear. He was wearing camo pants and a black hoodie covering his whole face. He was honestly the creepiest looking man that I've ever seen. He took off his black mask that he was wearing. He never hurt me, but he said that he's been watching me for a while and that I shouldn't walk alone at night time. Next time, he won't be so forgiving. And then he did some strange facial expressions, jumped up and down, and then bolted away. I made it home, but God, I was scared. I called my father. He told me to never walk home again at night, especially that late. I told him I always do, and he said that I should know better. I'm happy he didn't figure out which house I lived in because he caught up to me when I was about halfway there. I'm honestly never going to walk alone again. So, this isn't my story directly. This happened to my mother in 1991, in a known army town in Queensland, Australia. I apologize for the length, but I hope you'll stay to read the entire thing. It won't disappoint. I was around at the time, even though I was just a child. I do remember bits and pieces. I will try to do my best to do my mother's story the justice it deserves. So as I said, it's 1991. Somalia has erupted into civil war requiring UN intervention. Soldiers from our town are deployed, which leaves women and children home alone. Not a big deal now. Lots of single mums out there, but back in 91, it was a much rarer thing. This all started with a prowler alert. So the MPs alerting certain areas that someone had been spotted sneaking around yards and under houses late at night. We became aware of it when I screamed in horror at the man's face on the other side of my window. It was not a big deal until you hear that these houses were typical Queenslander homes, so that the house was on the second story and underneath was a wide open section only for slatting that surrounded it. This man had to have climbed the side of the house to be hanging there on my window, 2 stories, just to be peering in. MPs, or the military police, were deployed, found him down the street and issued a firm move-on order. So 2 weeks later, and the prowler warnings are ramping up. He's getting dangerous, harassing women in their laundries in the area under the houses, following them to their doors, up their external stairs at the rear of the properties, and watching them from the street, as well as stealing underwear off clotheslines. Residents are being warned to check their wheelie bins before bringing them in, as the prowler may be hiding in them to gain access to the properties. Scary stuff for young mothers with young children whose husbands are deployed. State police at this time have minimal jurisdiction, as the properties were owned by the army at the time, and MPs just decided the women were paranoid because their husbands were away. Another week goes by. My mother notices a man in her backyard. She's concerned, but my mother is a tough-as-guts lady, and as time progresses, he's at the same shopping centre watching her, walking down her street, just everywhere she seems to be. She reports every incident, but nothing is done. She gets home one day and something isn't right. You know, when you hear people say they had this gut feeling? Well, she did. She gets inside to discover the place had been gone through, nothing taken. She calls the MPs, and as she's looking out the front window, she sees that same man creep out of her garage. He was still there when she got home. I was with her at the time. I think that's what saved her that day. Again, nothing is done. She's brushed off as being paranoid. This is where my mum changes her demeanor. She pursed her lips and took a breath, tensing. Mum said some might call her crazy, but she's never had this experience before or since. She said she could almost hear him, hear his thoughts. She knew with every cell in her body that she was in danger. She said she could almost feel him nearby, looking at her, into her soul. She just knew he was there in the yard, looking up at her, somehow knowing exactly where she was in the house, despite blackout curtains and the lights off. So my mum calls the police again. They don't even bother coming out. I should note that she's not the only one who's reporting this. She's not the only one reporting a prowler. My mum packed me up the very next day, and we were on a bus interstate to stay with relatives until my father returned from deployment. She just knew in her gut that she was going to be murdered, and the police were not taking anything seriously. So, 93, my father returns from deployment. We return home. Mum, of course, had kept in contact with the other wives and had heard rumors swirling. We arrive home, and my mother retells me how a card was shoved under her door from the detectives. It was an apology that her complaints weren't taken seriously, but she and the neighborhood are now safe. However, 2 women are dead. There was an incident that had taken place. Both women were shot and Jennifer's throat had been cut. Later, a siege in Brisbane Park, 1,300 kilometers away, ended with the shooting suicide of one Jason Michael Knight, 19. The pistol he had shot himself with was connected directly to the 2 murdered women, leaving shattered families, a community that had lost its country free and trust, and my mother, who has never been the same since. If you look hard enough, there is an article from the Sydney Morning Herald to verify, though you do need to subscribe to read it. It's hard to find any other details or information, as rumor has it the killer was related to a higher up in the army. It was just kept very hushed, in a way in which once, when my mother tried to gain more information about it, she was told nothing of the sort ever took place. She asked, I, with my techno know-how, delve into the internet to find something. Well, that's my mother's story, of her encounter with a deranged double murderer who stalked her and an entire community for months, paying particular care to his prey and buying his time to strike. Hello everyone, Grimm here. Thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. If you've liked today's video, please remember, like and subscribe. It really does help me out. But either way, thank you very much for coming along. And, as always, I'm Grimm, and I'm, well, signing off.